Very good afternoon, I wish to everyone. First of all, thank you very much for coming. I didn't expect to have this much audience, to be honest, yeah. So for today, I'll be presenting my EPQ. So my title is the Malaysia Hope Fund. Is it simply a patriotic gesture, or is it a viable solution to repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt? So, yeah, without further ado, I'll start. So before I start, obviously when you're doing an EPQ, you'll be asked basic questions by your teachers, by your supervisors. So when I was planning and managing my EPQ, Mrs. Brown, who's my supervisor, asked me these basic questions. What is my EPQ going to be and why? So what will be my EPQ title and why? And how did I actually came across with this topic? And what are my aims and objectives for my EPQ? So the next several slides will be me explaining, answering these questions. So the reason that I wanted to do this EPQ because as a proud Malaysian, this topic is very close to me since it took place in 2018, which is right after the general election So I wanted to have a topic that I can relate to, and which is it's good that I'm doing about Malaysia, which is my own home country. So, and also because as a Malaysian central bank scholar, I'm aiming to have a career in central banking. Therefore, by doing a project that is based on economics and a little bit of politics, hopefully I can have a career in central banking and specifically aiming at monetary policy in the future. And also, I'm doing about the types of debt. So the 1 trillion ringgit debt, which I will go into detail, is a type of debt, and I wanted to know more about the type of debts we have, like internal, external, and etc. So I wanted to know what is it about these debts that makes it look very, like, for countries is very concerning. And also the Malaysian Hope Fund was a crowdfunding campaign, and I wanted to know to what an extent, or is it a viable solution to repay the debt. And my project is based on a bit of economics and also a bit of politics. And therefore, since I'm doing both economics and politics A-level subjects, therefore I can actually apply what I'm learning in class to my project. Yeah. So what actually inspired me to do this topic and what is it about? So in 2018, the Malaysian government announced that the national debt was at 1 trillion ringgit. And ever since that, a female law activist, Ms. Nik Shazarina, launched an unofficial fund on her fundraising page, which is GoFundMe, in which she managed to collect about 20,000 on her own, and therefore the Malaysian government was attracted to her idea of having this crowdfunding. So the Malaysian government, the Ministry of Finance, actually contacted Ms. Shazarina Bhakti and made the fund an official national crowdfunding campaign. So therefore, by doing this project, I wanted to evaluate whether the Malaysian Hope Fund, is it a viable solution to repay the debt, or is it just simply a patriotic gesture shown by Malaysia themselves? So, well, actually, what inspired me and also the Malaysian Hope Fund was actually the incident that took place in South Korea in 1997, in which South Korea implemented their own crowdfunding, which is the love trade or the gold donation in 1997 to overcome their external debt, which is 51 billion US dollars with the International Monetary Fund. So this inspired me to proceed with this project because personally I found it very unique. I tried Googling if there's any academic journals, I looked into libraries if there are any papers or research paper about this topic. Unfortunately, there are none at the moment because one, it was a newly debated topic in 2018. So there are not many academics or experts in this field that look into detail this topic, and it actually it was like a challenge to me because I thought, like, although this is a newly debated topic and there are lack of resources initially, but I managed to find resources that helped me to evaluate my topic. I found it like a challenge, and I decided to take the challenge and proceed with the project. So what were my aims and objectives? Firstly is to understand more about the 1 trillion ringgit debt and what the type of debt there are. So are they internal debt or is it an external debt? And also to evaluate the possibility of the Malaysia Hope Fund to actually repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt. And secondly is to find out whether the Malaysia Hope Fund, is it just simply a patriotic gesture or is it a viable solution to repay the debt? So when deciding my APQ topic, I knew from the beginning that I wanted to base my APQ topic on politics and also economics, as I'm doing both A-level subjects. And again, it was I found it very unique because it was a newly debated topic in Malaysia right after the general election 2018. And because it's based in Malaysia, then obviously I have a personal relation, an attachment to my own home country. And since I'm doing economics, this relates back to the different types of debt. So it widens my own interest in economics. So throughout my APQ journey, I changed my topic 3 times actually. I didn't stick with the current one from the beginning. And this is actually interesting, and I think it's important for not just me but any student that takes up APQ, that I realized that at the beginning that my topic will never be the final topic because there will always be flaws, there will always be mistakes. And I managed throughout my APQ journey and also with discussions with Mrs. Brown, I changed my topic 3 times. And I changed my topic from learning, my initial topic was learning from South Korea, 1997. Can the Malaysia Hope Fund repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt, or is it just an act of patriotism? I thought it was a good topic initially, but over time when I was writing my APQ, I realized that I wasn't emphasizing much about South Korea. And actually, my research was I wanted it to focus only on the Malaysian Hope Fund. But since my topic was having the term South Korea, so it's kind of like I was worried that I was going to deviate from the topic itself. So I had to do something to the title so that it can suit my research. So I came up with my second topic, which is, can the Malaysia Hope Fund repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt, or is it a patriotic gesture? So if you can see from my initial topic to my second title, I removed the phrase learning from South Korea 1997, and I replaced the act of patriotism with the term a patriotic gesture instead. So one reason why I removed the learning from South Korea was that my topic was based on the Malaysian Hope Fund itself. It wasn't really focused on South Korea, but I was taking South Korea as a model to the Malaysian Hope Fund. The success of the crowdfunding that happened in 1997 was an inspiration to the Malaysian Hope Fund. So even though I removed the phrase learning from South Korea into my second title, but the content is still there. It's just that I didn't want to deviate from my topic. So yeah, I replaced the act of patriotism with a patriotic gesture because I read an academic journal written by Alistair McIntyre, which is from the University of in the US. So he did a research about the act of patriotism and also a patriotic gesture, the definition behind the word patriotism itself. So throughout my reading, I realized that by having this phrase act of patriotism, it means that it kind of sounded like it was an act of patriotism, but in a forcefully, in a not unwilling will. So by replacing the act of patriotism with a patriotic gesture, I was more clear about what I wanted to know from the Malaysian Hope Fund. So the Malaysian Hope Fund was I would say it was a patriotic gesture, as it was started by a Malaysian activist before becoming a national crowdfunding. And from my second title, I then again made changes to it. My final topic is the Malaysian Hope Fund simply a patriotic gesture or a viable solution to repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt? From my second title to my final title, the only changes I made was by having this term, phrase, a viable solution. So one of the reasons why I added the phrase a viable solution, because the Malaysian Hope Fund, from the beginning I knew that the collection of the fund itself would not be enough to repay the whole 1 trillion ringgit debt. But then again, over time, my reading as well, I realized that it was one of the solutions to repay the debt. So, but then again, I wanted to know to what an extent can it be a viable solution to repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt. So when I was researching and also reading, these are the questions that my supervisor asked when I was using my resources. So she asked me how would I structure my EPQ, what will be included in my EPQ, what the research undertaken and why, what are my research findings and how do they help me answer my EPQ questions. And then again, are there any changes I made to my EPQ? Are there any title change and why? Are there any decision makings that took place? Are there any problem solvings I took to achieve planned outcomes? For the title, I already answered in the previous slide. For the rest of the questions, I'll be answering in the next slides. So when writing my EPQ, I broke down my EPQ into two parts. The first section is the Malaysia Hope Fund a viable solution to repay the 1 trillion ringgit debt? And the second section is the Malaysia Hope Fund a patriotic gesture? So by having my final title, I broke down into two very clear parts, which made it easier not just for me, but also for my readers to read my paper. So in the first section, I was explaining about the size of the debt and evaluate whether the fund is a viable solution to repay the debt. And also I took South Korea's 1997 crowdfunding success as a model to the Malaysia Hope Fund. So although I changed my title 3 times, but I didn't completely scrap South Korea's 1997 crowdfunding from my EPQ. Yeah. So in the second section, I looked into the launch of the fund and how it was set up initially, and I also conducted my own Google Form survey. So from the data I collected from my own survey, I analyzed it, and it helped me to evaluate whether the fund is a patriotic gesture. So a little bit of introduction to the Malaysia Hope Fund. So Nik Shazarina, she launched her own GoFundMe campaign in 2018. So right after she launched her own campaign, it caught the government's, the Ministry of Finance attention, and they made it official. Then officialized the fund into a national crowdfunding campaign. So for the purpose of this EPQ, a patriotic gesture means an act of devotion and commitment to one's country. So you must be wondering, what is the fund all about? Is it to tackle the 1 trillion ringgit debt? Or is it to tackle a portion of it? Or is it a patriotic gesture? So I'll be answering these questions in the next slide. Yeah. So to proceed with my EPQ, I had to have resources. So I didn't want to fully rely on books and academic journals and in the internet. So I decided to get into contact with Nik Shazarina, the girl who started it all, I would say. So Nik Shazarina was an activist that started the Hope Fund. So I managed to get into contact with her by sending her a message on Instagram. So she replied straight away, actually, which was actually very, very nice of her. So she agreed to have an email interview with me. So I asked her several questions, mainly about her intentions and what was her view of the fund. So one of the reasons why I proceed with the email interview was because I wanted to have a really strong, reliable source, rather than just believing the media. But then again, I was aware that I am contacting Ms. Shazarina, who's the founder of one of the founders of the Malaysia Hope Fund. So I'm aware that it might be politically biased. She might be politically biased, or she might not be answering honestly. So I was aware of that. So although I got into contact with her, I had to analyze her answers right after the email interview. Second, I had to use books. And luckily, Epsom's library is very good. I found a book written by Dr. Harvin Chang, which is a Cambridge graduate in economics. He did his master's in Cambridge as well, and he did his PhD in economics as well in Cambridge, and now a lecturer in economics at Cambridge. So I really believe that Dr. Harvin Chang is an expert in this field, and I know that since he's a lecturer, his work is held accountable. So what's his work is held accountable, and this book was actually written in 1997. Not really 1997. Yeah, it was based on 1997, the incident that took place, but it was written in the early 2000s. So it was really difficult to find this book, but luckily I managed to find it. And it helped me to understand more about what happened in 1997, mainly about the Asian financial crisis that struck South Korea. So it helped me to understand more about the external debt of the South Korea and how they managed to repay the debt by having crowdfunding. So, like I said before in the previous slides, I was taking South Korea as a model to Malaysia. So to understand or like to evaluate whether the Malaysian crowdfund is a viable solution, I had to understand what happened in South Korea and how it was effective in South Korea, and whether is it going to be effective in Malaysia. So the second book that I read was The $1 Billion Whale. So The $1 Billion Whale, which was written by Tom Wright and Bradley Hook, helped me to understand more about the YNDB scandal, money scandal, which contributed a lot to Malaysia's $1 trillion debt. So I'll explain more about what is the YNDB and how it contributed to Malaysia's debt. But The $1 Billion Whale was really helpful for me to understand how it accumulated the $1 trillion debt. So the third method is Google Form Survey. So I had to launch my own Google Survey form. One of the reasons is because there's no data that is available online, so I couldn't evaluate my EPQ without any data. So I had to make my own Google survey. So about 300 people responded to my survey. So it helped me to understand what are the public's view towards the fund itself, and whether they think is it a patriotic gesture, or do they think that it's going to burden them, or do they think that it's going to help to repay the debt. So it helps me to understand more about other people's view, and also by having this survey, it helps me to widen my way of research as well, because I would say it's very interesting, because back then if you want to do survey you have to do manually on papers, but now you have Google Forms. So I wanted to try something new. Next is using newspaper or e-news. So I had to keep myself updated with the news to know more about the latest news regarding the fund. So because the fund, they publish the figure every single day. So like Berita Harian and News Straits Times, they will update their website by stating the number of donation every day. So by keeping myself updated with the news, it helped me to know the figure day to day. And yeah, I received a lot of information from the newspaper, which helped me to evaluate my EPQ title. But then again, I was aware that not only just in Malaysia, but newspapers can be very politically biased, and therefore it can be easily manipulated by the government or by the writers themselves. So it required me to judge the information I received from my EPQ, and also the reliability of the information. I had to evaluate that. Articles and research papers. So this was the paper I read, which was written by Alistair McIntyre. So the title of the research paper was Is Patriotism a Virtue? So in that paper he illustrated about, he defined the word patriotism as an act of devotion or commitment. So I used his definition throughout my EPQ. So I found his work very helpful, as it was very detailed journal with a lot of research conducted before, and I thank him very much for that. I also watched several YouTube videos. Personally I don't really find it very reliable, since it can again be politically biased or manipulated by the government. But it really helped me to understand about the flow of the YNDB scandal that took place and that contributed to the $1 trillion debt. So going on to my research findings for my first section, I discovered that the $1 trillion debt is a type of internal debt. So by the term internal debt, it means that the debt is owed to lenders within the country. So this is different in contrast with external debt, which is debt that is owed to lenders outside the country. So we have like the World Bank, we have the International Monetary Finance, and also we have the ASEAN Fund. So the $1 trillion debt was a debt that is held locally within Malaysia, and it means that we are not owning any intergovernmental organizations outside Malaysia. We are only I would say like we are owing our own people. Yeah. So the internal debt, the 1 trillion ringgit debt was partially caused by the 1MDB itself. So this is a breakdown of the whole 1 trillion ringgit debt. So as you can see, the 1MDB debt was a portion of it, which is 32.2 billion. It's not a lot compared to other types of debt that contributed to the 1 trillion ringgit debt. But then again, the 1MDB debt was a major issue in Malaysia because the 1MDB, I would say it was a failed project because it was started by our former Prime Minister. But then over the years, the project wasn't a success, and the money that we owed comes with an interest. So if we are not tackling this 1MDB debt, then over the years, the debt will be accumulating and it will be increasing year by year, annually. So compared to the other debts, the debts still comes with an interest, but then again, like the federal debt, it's normal for countries, not just Malaysia, but like Japan and also US, they have federal debts. And it means that by having debts, it means that the government, Malaysia, is spending in its economy in like investment projects. So over the years, this federal debt or the government guarantees and the other liabilities that will be paid over the time by having investment projects and spending in the economy. But for the 1MDB debt, it was a failed investment project. So since it's the smallest portion, so the Malaysian government wanted to use the fund, the Malaysian Hope Fund, to repay the 1MDB debt as a portion of the 1 trillion ringgit debt. So in 1997, South Korea had an external debt. This is different to Malaysia, who has an internal debt. So South Korea had an internal debt with the IMF, which is about $58.4 billion, and they managed to repay the debt within 3 years, which is very impressive, I would say. So this inspired the Malaysian government to proceed with the Malaysia Hope Fund, because South Korea took the idea of having crowdfunding and it helped them to repay the debt within 3 years. So throughout my research, I made a simple table comparison between Malaysia and South Korea and how they implement the crowdfunding campaign. So in Malaysia, we have our type of debt is an internal debt, while on the other hand, South Korea's debt is an external debt. So although Malaysia's debt is an internal debt, which is less concerning compared to South Korea, but then again, our size of debt, I converted the 1 trillion ringgit into US dollars to make it fair to compare with South Korea. So South Korea only had a debt of 58.4 billion US dollars, while on the other hand, Malaysia's 1 trillion ringgit debt is 251 billion US dollars, which is 5 times larger than South Korea's external debt. So from the total collection from the fund, Malaysia only managed to collect about 48.8 million US dollars, while South Korea managed to collect from their own crowdfunding campaign about 2.2 billion US dollars. So the currency of the debt is held in ringgit Malaysia, while South Korea, since it's an external debt, they owe the IMF in US dollars. So then again, it comes back to the exchange rates. That is, they might fluctuate over the years. So it was more concerning for them as it was an external debt. But when it comes to Malaysia and we look at the size of the debt, it was 5 times larger than South Korea, and it was actually concerning because our collection was only 0.02% from the total debt. So it wasn't going to compensate for the debt itself.
And in terms of interest rates, do you have any data?
I do not have any data on the interest rate. But then again, I wanted it to make it simple, so I only look at the Malaysia's collection and its debt. I didn't look over the interest rate. Because when it comes to like interest rate, it's going to be a bit troublesome because South Korea's debt was in 1997, so we couldn't have enough data on that. Yes.
Regarding size of the debt, is it in real terms or nominal terms?
It was in real terms. Yeah, it was in real terms. I was aware about the real and the nominal GDP, but because to make it fair, we need to look at the real GDP. It wouldn't be fair to look at the nominal. So in my second section, this is the email that I got from Ms. Shazarina. Very nice of her to reply. So she started her own fundraising campaign. She managed to collect about 20,000, to be exact, actually 13,476 ringgit and 57 cents on her own. So in October 2018, I had an email interview with her. So this is her reply. And these are the few questions that I asked her and her answers.
So that lady started to collect funds with the purpose of repaying the debt.
Yeah.
So this is how it started all.
Yeah. So
and then she got contacted by the government to make it something.
To make it official. Yeah.
Is she linked to the Prime Minister at the time?
No, she's not linked. She's working in a an NGO, a non-government organization, which is Sisters in Islam. So it's a non-profit organization that helps people, the society. So she wasn't.
So what was her aim at the time? Yeah? Was it to alarm people about the debt, or was it a genuine intent to repay everything?
So I was at this moment when I emailed her, I wasn't really clear of what her intentions were. So the first question that came to my mind was that if I get a chance to email her, my first question would be, why did you start it? Why did you start it? So thank you for that. So yeah, actually was the first question. So I asked her, why did you actually started the whole crowdfunding thing? I quote, when it was announced that the national debt was at 1 trillion ringgit, I became very worried. Everyone started talking about it 24/7, and I suddenly thought to myself, let's do something to help the country. And it wasn't really clear of her reason of why she started the crowdfunding. So I started with the second question. I asked her, what was your actual aim for conducting the crowdfunding? Again, I quote, to help the country with the 1 trillion ringgit debt. Definitely the patriotism side of me. So the second sentence really took my attention when she used the word patriotism, because as you can see, I didn't mention anything about patriotism, but she was the one who brought it first. So I was like, okay, so this must be something to do with the word patriotism, with the term patriotism itself. So she said, I know the national debt is not like how I owe money to another individual. So I can understand from what she's trying to say here. She said that it's not like how I owe money to another individual. When I read her reply, I thought she meant something to do with an external debt, because she knew that the Malaysian 1 trillion ringgit debt was an internal debt, so it was owed within the country. So she knew that it was very different to an external debt, and she said that I was hoping that every little help will benefit the country. So she knew that since it's an internal debt, every help and every donation that she managed to collect will definitely benefit the country, even though the figures are small. So I asked her, to what extent do you believe that the Malaysia Hope Fund will overcome the national debt? So she said, the fund may or may not overcome the national debt, but I truly believe that it will help to an extent. This is when I realized I have a problem with the email interview, because I emailed her in October 2018. So the fund only started several months. So me, not just me, but herself, both of us, we don't know how long will the crowdfunding be, because it wasn't announced at the beginning of the start that it was going to be for a year, and it was a continuous effort. So day by day, we will keep ourselves updated with the figures. And she didn't know about to an extent or when will this the fund stop. So she couldn't give a definite answer whether it will overcome the national debt. So my final question was that I asked her, what does the fund really mean? Was it a solution or was it an act of patriotism? So she said that for me it was an act of patriotism, first and secondly, and as an assistant to our country, the fund can be one of the solutions, but not the only solution. The economy, among others, has to get better, and it will help with the debt. So there are her answers. If I can be very honest, it was very helpful at the beginning of my research. But over time, when I was writing my APQ, I had this little thought of an idea that came to my mind. Was that if only I had the chance to have a second email interview with her, I would definitely be not criticizing, but would ask further questions about the answers. Because if you can see, her answers are quite vague, I think. And because it was at the start of the fund, and now the fund is really closed, I think her answers might change if I have a chance to speak with her. But then again, I realized that she's quite busy with her work, and I'm quite busy with A-levels as well. And I think that this is one of the weaknesses that I found within my EPQ, because I couldn't get into contact with her for the second time. So in my reading, the fund, every donation will be deposited into a commercial bank, Maybank. So donations can only be made in ringgit Malaysia. So, well, obviously the donation can't go into the Ministry of Finance budget or fund, because it will be biased, politically biased, if it goes into the government's fund. And second, it can't go to central bank, because central banks don't open bank accounts. That's a joke actually, but yeah. So donations can only be made in ringgit Malaysia, since it's held locally. So there's no point of donation to be received in other currencies, because there will be a problem with the exchange rate when converting into ringgit Malaysia. So it's better if every donation is be made in ringgit Malaysia. This is actually a statement by the Minister of Finance himself. So this the results I got from my Google Form survey. So in my first question I asked, do you think the fund is a political stunt or an act of patriotism? So about 64.3% said that the fund was an act of patriotism of the public. This is what the public think of. And 35.7% disagree. And again, I realized that there's a problem with my question, because I used the term political stunt, because at the beginning of my research it was mainly about an act of patriotism. The only reason why I included the term political stunt, because initially I thought in my beginning of my research, I thought an act of patriotism, the opposite of it is a political stunt. But then again, after discussion with Mrs. Brown, I realized that no, there's no correlation between political stunt and act of patriotism. They are two different things, and they can't be we can't find a common ground between these two terms. So this is another weakness of my EPQ that I realized. The next question, I asked whether the crowdfunding idea is a wise action for the government. Yeah, the majority said yes. Then we have 31.7% who said no. And then again, I'm quite aware that this took place in 2018, which is the year of the general election. So some people might be politically biased. Some people, because these are anonymous. I didn't know. I do not know who answered these questions, who answered this survey. They might be the new government's voters. They might be the opposition's voters. So this is exactly what they answered. So I do not have any comments on that. But it helped me to understand that yes, the majority of the people in Malaysia really think that it is a wise action from the government. Do you think the crowdfunding idea will benefit the public? 79% said no. Then again, 21% said yes. So it made me wonder why they said no. Why they say no, and then in my reading I came across an article saying that the Malaysia Hope Fund was a voluntary action that the Malaysian people took. Because there's no compulsory salary cuts for government or civil servants, so it wasn't a thing forced by the government. It was completely voluntary. So I can understand why 79% said no, because I think most of them donated on their own will, and there were no salary cuts. So yeah. To what extent do you believe that the fund can help repay Malaysia's national debt? 77.3% say it can help to reduce the debt, although it is not possible to repay the whole entire debt. 7.3% were very enthusiastic and said yes, it will. 50.3% said no, it's not possible to repay the debt. Yeah. The next question, do you think the fund, this is a repetition for the previous one. Yeah. So I came to my conclusion, which is the Malaysia Hope Fund managed to collect donations about 202 million ringgit, which is 0.02% from the whole actual total debt, which is 1 trillion ringgit. Hence, it is not a viable solution to repay the 1 trillion debt. However, it may help to reduce the debt, especially the 1 MBB debt. Since the fund was started by a Malaysian activist, Ms. Hazarina, a Malaysian activist, it was never the government's initial idea, and I established this at the beginning of my EPQ research, and it was purely a patriotic gesture shown by the Malaysian themselves. So after writing my EPQ, my supervisor then again asked me questions about what are the problems I came across throughout my EPQ, were there any lessons I learned from this EPQ, what are the strengths and weaknesses of my EPQ, and how will my EPQ help me in my future career, and what are the changes I will make to my EPQ if I were to do it again. So problems I came across and how I tackled them. One, the lack of primary resources regarding the Malaysian Hope Fund. Second, lack of analysis and further evaluations. For the first one, it was really difficult to find papers or journals regarding the Malaysian Hope Fund. It was a newly debated topic. No one actually thought of making a research about it. I'm glad I'm the first actually. So it was really difficult, especially when it comes to the figures, because no one actually took the donations collection and compared it to GDP. Malaysia has an 80% of GDP to debt ratio, which makes it possible to repay the whole 1 trillion ringgit debt. But then again, no one actually find out whether the fund would compensate for the debt itself. So it was really difficult for me to write a paper about something that no one actually thought about it. But then again, I think I was being very creative when I started the Google Form survey. I think I was really creative when I tried to link it back with South Korea, which it made me realize that actually without sufficient resources regarding the Malaysian Hope Fund, it's actually still possible to write a paper about it by having different resources, especially when having an interview with Ms. Shazarina. She helped me a lot. So again, I'm so thankful for her. Yeah. The lack of analysis and further evaluation. So when I was writing my EPQ, Mrs. Brown kept on telling me, you need to be aware that people...
I don't know what that, I'm a bit of a wally, basically. I don't know about economics.
Yeah, so like you need to assume that the person reading it does not know anything about economics or business studies or anything. And no offense, but yeah. Presume that readers already know about it. So I had to make it very simple so that not only me but also my readers can actually understand what I'm trying to present in my EPQ. How my product might affect my future career or education. So in the short run, my EPQ qualification will be a part of my application to the University of Bath, which is one of my 5 university choices. So by having an A in EPQ, hopefully an A star, will reduce my offer by at least a grade, entry requirements by a grade. But then again, I was looking more into the future. So in the long run, since I'm a Malaysian Central Bank, I'll be pursuing an economics degree in the UK. So therefore, by having an EPQ, it helped me with analysis skills, it helped me with researching, it helped me with referencing, especially by using the Harvard style citations. And evaluating, when it comes to evaluating, it was the most difficult part I came across, but I'm very grateful that I managed to do it. And also, since I'm aiming to have a career in central banking, this EPQ will help me understand more about the different types of debt and how much impact it can have in an economy. So for central bankers, this is very important because when it comes to monetary policies or any policy making decisions, it's very important to understand the nature of the debt itself. So yeah, a part of my application to the University of Bath. So what new knowledge or expertise have I found valuable? One, citations and references. I found it very useful because when you're at university, you'll be doing a lot of research papers, you'll be doing a lot of papers. So by doing this EPQ, I learned how to do citations and references in the Harvard style. And also how to write a formal and professional academic writings, which is very important since we'll be writing a lot of theses at university. And also researching skills, analysis, evaluate, and judgments.
Sorry, I think yeah, that's very good. You presented the main points. I think we may start with questions because the presentation you see is about 10 to 15 minutes, and I think we exceed a little bit of the time. But that's fine. We can keep all this, and we can put that into what we send to AQA exam, so it won't be lost. I think it would be good if we can start with questions now that you presented your research already, yes? Okay.
I have a question.
Yes?
Yeah. Right. We know for a fact that the government chose to implement a less efficient system, which is SSE, instead of implementing GST, which means that right now the government is generating less revenues, and the government is now shamelessly asking for the help of the public. First, doesn't Malaysia Hope Fund indicate the inability of the government to utilize their own policy, i.e. fiscal policy, to pay this debt? Second, do you think that patriotism is now an illusion to manipulate the citizens to assist the government to pay for the debt, even if it doesn't burden the citizens and so on?
Yeah, for the first question, okay, since it took place, the fund was started in October 2018, right after the general election. So the general election took place in April 2018. So actually, it was really clear when the government, the Prime Minister, if I can quote, made it very clear in the press conference stating that the fund was never going to pay the debt. However, it was an act of unity, acts as a platform for the people to come together as a country and help to repay the debt. So actually, it wasn't about the inability to repay the debt, because when they discovered that the debt was at 1 trillion ringgit, obviously the logical way is for the government to repay the debt is to generate tax, to generate revenue by raising tax or other monetary policies. But they wanted the people, they were more focusing about the moral behind the fund, which is to get people to come together and work. Because in Malaysia, it was the first time in 2018 that the Malaysia switched government, and for the first time ever, the opposition won their first general election. So they wanted they wanted the people to come together, and they wanted to know to what extent do the people have support for the new government. So I would say it wasn't really a thought through method decision from the government, but it was merely about getting the people to come together. And since it was started by a Malaysian activist, it was never in the government's idea. And personally, I think if Nick Shazalini didn't start that campaign, no one would actually think of having it. Yeah. So the second question was about
whether patriotism is now an illusion to manipulate the citizens into helping the government.
Yes. So from the survey, I was aware that the survey would not be that reliable, but from the survey the survey I conducted, I got to know that the majority of people think that it is a patriotic way to show their love towards the country. But we can't, there's no clear measurement to say is it patriotic or not. Because it was like, if you donate, it does not mean that you are being patriotic. Because what happened in 2018 was that a company tried to donate 2 million ringgit, or is it 1 million ringgit? I forgot the figure, but it's included on EPQ. The government, specifically the Prime Minister, Dr. Mahathir, rejected the donation. Although it's a 2 million ringgit in like one go, it was going to help a lot. But then again, he realized that you can't just accept that kind of donation, because he knew that the firm has something, was expecting something in return from the government. So he rejected the fund, the donation publicly. He said that we can't accept this donation because we believe that there's a second intention, there's a different intention of you donating, that you are expecting something. So they wanted, right after that, they actually closed the fund. They closed it in, if I'm not mistaken, in March 2019. So they only managed to collect 202 million. So some people criticize, why are you doing it for less than a year? You should continue it. You might be able to collect more donations. But he said, no, we can't, because over time he realized that it was no longer a patriotic gesture shown by the people. Initially it was, but he knew that he had to stop the donation because it was deviating from its main purpose. Yeah, next question. Yes.
Okay. So after all this presentation, okay, it was good, by the way. Do you think that the debt is so severe that crowdfunding is needed? Because just now I read the question of Shazalina. So it started because Shazalina was worried that the debt is too big. She said she's worried. But then is it good economy-wise? Because I can think that there are some other countries who have much higher debt to GDP ratio. Like for example, Japan, which has more than 200%. Unlike Malaysia, which only have 80%. Just now you mentioned it. So, do you think that it is severe? The debt is very severe economy-wise. That crowdfunding is needed.
So, because the debt was held locally in Malaysia, it was 1 trillion ringgit debt and it's an internal debt. So it was concerning for a developing country, especially Malaysia. Although we have an 80% of GDP to debt ratio, it was possible for Malaysia to repay the debt. But then again, like I explained, the 1 MDB debt comes with a very, very high interest. So the Malaysian government were really keen on the idea of tackling this 1 MDB debt. So initially, when it comes to like problems like this, obviously you want to tackle problems as soon as possible. So what the government thought at first was that, okay, we might make something out of this fund, although the figures are very, very small. I mean like 202 million in less than a year, which is 0.02%. Obviously, it was a really, really small figure, and some would say that it's unnecessary because obviously it would never compensate for not even the small portion of 1 MDB debt. But the Malaysians said we needed as much help and support for the people themselves. So it goes back to my second section of the EPQ, which is it simply a patriotic gesture, and then make it say yes. And actually, Mr. Lim Guan Eng, the Minister of Finance, said even if you donate a day 100 ringgit to the debt, it's going to take them, I don't know, he said something about 10,000 years, then only they can repay for the whole 1 trillion ringgit debt. So it shows that the debt will never be a viable solution, but it's one of the solutions. So I think it's my mistake because I didn't include Ms. Shazarina's full interview. But one of the questions I asked her and the reply was that the fund was one of the solutions to repay the debt. She envisioned the fund as one of the solutions and not just the only solutions. But I understand when it comes to 1 trillion ringgit debt, obviously 202 million would never compensate for it. Yes.
This is a very simple question. I just want to know why is internal debt easier to pay off than external one?
Okay, so the internal debt, because we're owing people inside. So let's say I give a very simple metaphor. I'm owing Yongqi. So Yongqi is an Epsom student. So I see her every day. So it makes me easy for me to pay her debt. Let's say if I owe a girl in KTJ something. So I need to let's say if I don't have internet, so I need to go to KTJ and pay her. So the cost of transportation I pay just to go to KTJ and pay the debt. So it's like that. So when it comes to internal debt and external debt is you're owing people within the country, and the interest rate are in Malaysian ringgit. But when it comes to external debt, for example, what happened to South Korea, they owed IMF 51 billion. Okay, they got bailed out from the Asian financial crisis, but it came with a price. They were banned from economic sanctions. They were given economic sanctions. They couldn't make any export, I'm not mention export or import, but they were banned from economic transactions within that 3 years. So it was a really big thing for South Korea. And 1997, the Asian tigers were Malaysia. It has always been Malaysia, but then again, right after the 1997 incident, South Korea took over our title of the Asian economies, the Asian tiger. So now, by repaying everything with the IMF, South Korea is now one of the most developing country with a really high GDP and one of the Asian tigers. Yeah, not Malaysia anymore. Yeah. Next question.
I have one, yeah. It's regarding the timeline of May 2018. So the 9th of May, you had the elections.
Yeah.
The 30th, so Mahathir won. The same month, they start the Hope Fund, and the same month, they start the special audit for 1 MDB.
Yeah.
So in your presentation, you had, is it a political stunt?
Yeah.
I just would like to come back to that, because we have a timeline that may justify that.
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
I think because it was, then again, the fund was started by a Malaysian activist, and she started it on her own. So the Malaysia at the moment, it was a hectic moment, I think, because it was right after the general election, and to be honest, the government were actually not confident of winning the general election actually, but they managed to win. And it was a problem because we announced our cabinet executive a bit late, 2 weeks after the general election. So it was very chaotic for the Malaysian government. And then they had to look into the YMDB investigation. So it was really, really hectic at that moment. So when it comes to when the Minister of Finance took over the Ministry of Finance, they investigate the debt and discovered there's actually the debt is exceeding 1 trillion ringgit. So it was a big thing in Malaysia because we never dealt with debt as big as that before in our government. And because the OMDB debt comes with a very, very high interest, so they had to do something quick. So they had to look into the investigation of the OMDB, and up until today they're still looking into it, and the former Prime Minister is still being questioned about it. So there's no end to the OMDB scandal at the moment, and the government was planning on paying the debt. So the fund would say it wasn't really a political stunt, but it was, since it was started by the Malaysian activists, so they had to take the opportunity to make it officialized.
So one add-on to that question then, because you showed us that the 1MDB actually is a small portion of the debt.
Yeah.
So why the communication from the government was so much focused on 1MDB?
Yeah. So actually,
Because if it is not 1MDB, I think the previous Prime Minister from 1981 was actually the person who started the report for himself.
what is that?
The person who was in charge of the country for more than 20 years was the person who blamed another person for the debt. There's actually a small portion. So, what's your explanation?
Well, because the debt itself, if we look, the YDB is a very, very small portion of the debt. But then again, the other debt, they were very confident they can manage to repay over time, because by having investment projects and also spending and also the tax revenue, they will knew that over time they will be able to manage to repay the debt annually. But the YMDB, because it was a failed project, investment project, so they think that we have to repay the debt as soon as possible because it comes with a very interest. So even if you can't manage to repay a small portion of the debt, you can't move to focus on the other part of the debt, because the YMDB is a very small portion. So they were really keen on the idea of tackling the YMDB. And I think at one point they believed that the YMDB case, once they finish with that debt, the whole country can stop talking about it. So they wanted to have something at their side. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
I have one question. You said just now that internal debt is easy to pay, but do you think that this kind of solution is good for that type of debt? Because like the government owe the people, but then they expect the people to pay the debt.
Yeah, I think personally, I think because I can't say that the Malaysian hope is not a success. We managed to collect 0.02% of the total debt within less than a year, and I think the problem was because our debt was 5 times larger than South Korea. I think like if we had a smaller debt, it would be very effective in tackling the debt. But because our debt, although it was an internal debt, it was 5 times larger than South Korea. It did manage to help reduce the debt in South Korea. They managed to collect about 2.2 billion within 3 years. But they did it in the span of 3 years. We did it in the span of several months. So it was unfair to say that the fund was ineffective. It was effective, but to an extent, it was only 0.02% of the total debt. But I think if we had a smaller, if other countries have a smaller debt, and if they implement the same thing, it might be very effective. Because if it helped South Korea within 3 years, it shows that it is possible to an extent to use crowdfunding as one of the solutions to repay national debts.
Is it fair though? Is that what you mean, Mark?
Yeah, is it fair? Is it fair? Because like the government owe the people, but they expect the people to pay for the debt. I mean, for South Korea, it makes sense because they have an external debt. For us,
Yeah.
it's internal debt.
I think in terms of fairness, are you trying to say fairness?
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, South Korea, it was actually it wasn't voluntary in South Korea actually. Yeah, they collect 256 metrics of gold. So every person in South Korea who has gold in their house, they need to donate a portion of it. So about 56 grams of gold, they must donate it. So all of the housewives in households in Korea donated all of their gold, and it was partially compulsory for them. But in Malaysia, we have no salary cuts, we have no laws or policies saying that we need to give or contribute to the fund. So it was purely voluntary in Malaysia's defense.
But if it is necessary, why there is not an increase in taxes then? That's what the government would do in the case of
In 2018, one of the opposition, the new government's manifesto was to replace the SST with, to replace GST with SST. And personally, I would say I disagree. I think GST is a more transparent taxation system, but I think the only problem was that the GST was taxed as a 6%, which is very high. And I think the government should have increased it to like 3% instead of replacing it with SST. Because by having GST, it actually generates more tax revenue for the government. So that was the most, I think, the most logical way of tackling national debt was actually taxation system plays a major role in tackling national debt. So in 2018, because they said that in their manifesto they're going to replace the GST with SST, revert back to SST. So they were in a situation where they had to follow their manifesto or else they will be criticized for it. So they went back to SST, and that's when the problem happened. We started to generate less tax revenue, and the government felt that we can't be able to repay the debt by just relying on taxation. So they had to get help from other sources as well. Yeah, and since it was started from again an activist, so they took the opportunity. Yeah, but it was never the idea of conducting the crowdfunding. You good? Yeah.
Okay, what are your current findings about how the money will be used or is used now to pay the debt? And what's your opinion about paying the debt in the short term being the feasible solution?
Yeah, actually, I written that in my EPQ about the debt will be focused purely on the YDB. So I think this is November. So I think in August, was it in August or October? I forgot. There were statements from the government saying that it will be used entirely. The fund will be entirely used for the YDB debt, but they're not very sure how they will use it. But they state that they will. And up until today, I'm still looking into it. And yes, there's no formal or press statement saying that how it will be used. But the government made it clear that it will be used. So I think in the future they will use it, but I'm not very sure how. But hopefully it will benefit the country. Yeah. Next question.
In terms of sources, yes. So I'd like to know what you found regarding sources from Malaysia and foreign sources, because obviously Malaysia is not ranking very high in terms of freedom of press. So did you notice anything on that? And if so, did you find any negative articles about that specific fund within Malaysia?
Actually, the lessons learned from my EPQ was that analyzing sources, are they reliable or are they useful? So yes, as I established in my EPQ at the beginning, Malaysia's newspaper companies are very politically biased. It's very, very obvious. So I had to read every single newspaper, and the way I used my my readings from newspaper was that I only looked at the figures because I wanted to know what's the collection of the donation daily. And also I had to go to like other international newspapers like Bloomberg to know about the YDB scandal, because obviously I think Bloomberg is more reliable compared to Berita Harian, no offense, but yes. I had to also look into the Straits Times, the Singapore paper, but then again there's a limitation to it because I had to subscribe to it, and I can't afford to subscribe to Straits Times, so it was very limited for me to know. But in terms of reliability, I think it was really difficult because I had to distinguish between sources that are reliable and not unreliable. But I think to an extent, it helped me to evaluate the possibility, whether the fund is a patriotic gesture. But for the second section, the patriotic gesture, I would say it was purely me and all of my my own research. My email interview, my Google form survey, and also my own reading about the term patriotism itself. I wasn't really relying on newspapers about my second section, but it helped me in my first section, which is whether it's a viable solution to repay the debt. Newspapers helped me in that area. Yeah. Yes, please.
I have a question about this 1 trillion ringgit debt.
Yes.
Do you consider this is a government failure? And if it's a government failure, do you think it's fair for us to pay back and for the government to use taxation money to pay back this national debt to cover up the fact that it's a government failure?
Yeah, so whether it's a government failure, yes, it's definitely a government failure. That's a big yes. Because it was started, I wouldn't entirely blame the former administration, but it happened in 2009. That's when the YNDB started, was created in 2009 in the former Prime Minister's administration. So since then, we didn't see the success of the investment project. And over the years, when the new government swapped over, we realized that it's actually a failure because we are not generating wealth. We are actually generating more debt. So, and then of the money laundering scandal, they realized that the investment project of the YNDB itself, the money was actually used by some key figures in this case. So there's a figure to it about how much money were used from the from the investment, the YNDB project for their own personal use. So it was definitely a government failure. And the second part of the question was?
Is it fair for government to use taxation money to pay back the national debt?
Well, we're not only relying on taxation, but for every country, taxation system plays a major role because that's where you generate revenue for the country. And obviously, countries might use it for investments to spend the economy. But Malaysia, I believe Malaysia has a different case to it because Malaysia, we are very rich in natural resources, especially petroleum and oil. So we're not just relying on taxation system, we're also relying on our exports and imports. And knowing Malaysia, we're quite stable on our exports because Malaysia, we produce our oil. And for your information, our oil are very special because it's for aircrafts. So Malaysia, we don't produce our own aircraft, we don't produce Boeing, but we produce fuel for Boeings. So countries like US, Russia, I'm not very sure if Germany builds planes, but they buy a lot of oil from us. So yes, it's unfair for Malaysia to just rely on taxation. But when it comes to this huge number of debt, whatever help you get, you have to take the opportunity, and that's what they did. They took the opportunity of using the fund as one of the solutions. Yeah. Next question.
Any other questions? Okay. So thank you very much. I think it was a great presentation, and yes, I think we will review it with Mrs. Brown and what will be sent to AQA. But although we've not seen everything will be sent. So
yeah.
Don't feel like you didn't have enough time.
No, exactly.
Everything will be relevant in the end.
But I think the questions help me more if I answer them.
That's it. The questions may help you to change a bit your essay. Still, we still have time to.
Yeah, I think so. Especially the interest rate, I try to look into the
That's
interest
fine.
rate. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So can I go in next Tuesday?
The piano back as well. That's nice.
Because on Monday I have gym. I will be skipping Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday. I was just thinking about something. How long would be your presentation? Your presentation would be about.
I will